Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are breaking down the fascinating mechanics and the internal narrative of a highly structured tarot reading. We're going to be looking closely at a specific case study from a parlor called The Otherside. Now, whether you're a seasoned practitioner yourself or just kind of curious about the process, the actual architecture of a reading, how the narrative is built, structured, and delivered, is honestly an absolute masterclass in blending deep intuition with sharp logic. So let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Listen to this beautiful quote. "My reading room is a sanctuary for positive vibrations." That was the warm welcome given by Lucretia Eddy, everyone calls her Lucy, to her 12 p.m. client Lee. Right off the bat, Lucy establishes this incredibly cozy, protected mood. It's not just a polite greeting, it's actually a deliberate framing technique to set aside any outside tension and completely prepare the client's mindset for the experience ahead.
Section 1. Welcome to the Other Side. Setting the scene.
To truly understand how this reading unfolds, we first have to understand the highly structured environment it takes place in, and of course the practitioner behind it all. Lucy's journey is quite fascinating. She was born in 1976, right during the US bicentennial, which is a little detail she absolutely loves to share, and she started reading tarot for her friends in college around 1995. Well, what started as a casual interest spread like wildfire, mainly because her friends quickly realized she had these spot-on, almost clairvoyant-like abilities. Her observations were just incredibly accurate. This lifelong passion eventually culminated in 2020 when she opened the Otherside Parlor, which is this fantastic, welcoming little shop on Woodmere Street in 12th Avenue in downtown Lockwood, Washington.
But Lucy isn't the only practitioner at the Other Side. We have to introduce you to Casey. Casey is Lucy's large, highly perceptive black cat, very cleverly named after the famous clairvoyant Edgar Cayce. Casey is this wonderful recurring motif in the parlor's environment. In fact, when Lee arrived, this feline co-host actually greeted him with a very distinct meow and a firm rub against his leg. As Lee joked, it really felt like he was being given official permission to enter the sanctuary. It just adds an incredible layer of charm and comfort to the whole space.
Now, what's really interesting here is that despite the mystical atmosphere, Lucy maintains incredibly strict professional boundaries. She charges exactly a $40 fixed fee for her services, nothing more, nothing less, and those services are tightly structured. She conducts a 1-hour reading, and she tracks the time not with a buzzing digital clock or a phone timer, but with an antique hourglass. This brilliantly grounds the spiritual practice in a very clear, reliable, and professional framework.
Section 2. The fishbowl method. The mechanics of intuition.
As Lee is invited past the front waiting room curtain and into the cozy 12 by 12-foot reading room, we get to the core of the session. The room is super intimate. Think dark green carpet, patterned tapestries, a crystal ball, and a rose quartz candle holder sitting on a black tablecloth. Here, Lucy uses what she calls the fishbowl method, which is highly tactile and interactive. First, she asks Lee to place his fingers on the deck and make a silent wish. Basically, a desire to learn something of real value for his upcoming month of July. Then she scatters the cards completely loose across the table, literally like fish in a bowl. Finally, she asks him to pick 3 cards without overthinking it. He's instructed to just let his intuition guide his hand, drawing automatically from the loose pile, rather than simply cutting a neat deck. To officially begin, Lucy lights a single candle and speaks this really simple, grounded phrase: "I invite the spirits and advisement for 1 hour." I love this because it beautifully illustrates the dual nature of her practice. On one hand, you have this deep, mystical connection locking into a spiritual source. But on the other hand, it's bound by a highly logical, non-negotiable 1-hour time limit. The antique hourglass is flipped, and the reading is officially underway. Section 3, the 3-card spread: situation, obstacle, and advice. Let's move to the layout and see how this builds. Lucy actually prefers a highly focused, straightforward approach over overly complicated, sprawling spreads. So she uses a classic 3-card spread to provide the absolute clearest path forward for Lee's July. Here is the narrative arc mapped out perfectly. His current situation is the Queen of Cups. Lucy explains this means he's entering July deeply immersed in profound intuition, a rich imagination, and incredible emotional depth. His creative wells are full, but he's feeling things very deeply. Next up, the obstacle. That's the 9 of Wands, which indicates weariness and defensiveness. And Lee immediately recognizes this. He notes he's feeling exhaustion from past battles and has this hypervigilant instinct to guard his territory. Finally, the advice is the King of Swords. To overcome that exhaustion, Lee must step into total mental clarity, absolute authority, and sharp logic.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dramatic thematic contrast Lee is going to have to navigate. On one side, he is starting in the energy of the Queen of Cups, living with deep emotion and a highly creative soul. But to succeed, he has to pivot entirely to the King of Swords. He has to embrace intellectual detachment, absolute authority, and sharp logic. He literally has to drop that weary defensive stance of the Nine of Wands and command his creative domain with a clear, disciplined intellect. It's a massive, massive shift from feeling to thinking. Section 4. Pulling the clarifier, resolving the energies.
Because of this drastic pivot between deep emotion and sharp logic, Lucy realizes the narrative actually needs a bit more focus. She suggests pulling a fourth card to see exactly how these wildly opposing energies are going to play out together. Lee is all in and immediately accepts her offer. She calls this a clarifier, which is an additional card drawn to show how the intersecting energies of a reading ultimately resolve. It acts as the final puzzle piece, really. It takes the abstract advice of, hey, get more logical, and turns the reading into a highly cohesive, practical blueprint for the client.
So Lee draws the Seven of Cups. The imagery on this card is striking. It depicts 7 chalices floating in the clouds, each holding a different, mysterious gift or illusion. Lucy explains exactly what this means for his July. He is going to be facing a dizzying array of choices, temptations, and distractions. There are going to be brilliant illusions and a whole lot of smoke and mirrors. This clarifies exactly why he needs that sharp King of Swords energy. If he relies solely on his vast imagination right now, he'll just get lost in all the scattering, glittering options.
Now, just as the last grains of sand fall through the antique hourglass and Lucy extinguishes the candle, something incredible happens. Casey the cat hops down from the love seat, walks right up to the table, and reaches out with his large black paw. He gently taps the Seven of Cups card and lets out a soft purr. Lee is totally charmed by this, joking that the feline master has officially given his stamp of approval. Lucy just smiles and says he rarely misjudges a breakthrough. It's just a wonderful, memorable moment that perfectly caps off the reading.
Section 5. Focusing the vision, the final resolution.
So the crucial point is how the client actually walks away from the table. A good reading isn't just about exploring fun symbols, it's about providing a framework for real action. By the end of the hour, Lee has a crystal clear blueprint for his month. He realizes that while his imagination is vast and beautiful, he absolutely cannot let us distract him. He must actively cut through the noise and distractions. He needs to drop that weary defensive stance he's been holding on to from past battles. And most importantly, he must rely entirely on his sharp analytical logic to choose the one true cup among all the fantasies presented to him. As he says it perfectly himself, it's time to cut through the noise and focus the vision. Now, right before leaving, Lee tries to hand Lucy his $40 fee, along with a crisp $5 bill as a tip for pulling that extra clarifier card. But Lucy politely waves it away. She completely refuses the extra money, stating firmly that her price is fixed and she only ever takes her standard fee. This just proves her total commitment to her professional boundaries. It really reinforces that the structure of the reading, the time limit, the fee, the rigid rules, is just as important to her practice as the mystical elements themselves.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this explainer today. As Lucy tells Lee right before he steps back out into the afternoon sun, the truth is always clear when you look right at it. So, I want to leave you with this question to ponder. When faced with a dizzying array of choices in your own life, how do you separate the true path from brilliant illusions? How do you manage to balance your deep, creative emotions with the sharp, detached logic needed to make the right call? Think about that as you navigate your own journey. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the fascinating architecture behind this reading. Travel safe.